Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Unrestricted Live. I'm so excited for today. Hello, let me introduce myself really quick. My name is Athena Simpson. I am a business, event, and marketing consultant, and I am also a productivity coach. And I started Unrestricted because I realized that our societal views of success and the way that we chase these untenable dreams is broken. And actually, we need to go about rewriting success for ourselves and define it on our own terms. And I got inspired by all the amazing women around me in my life that are daring to be different and blaze their own paths and have really inspiring ways of thinking about how they can live unrestricted in their own ways. So this podcast is all about celebrating this idea of unrestricted and introducing you to amazing women who are defining success on their own terms. And they come from all walks of life and have all amazing stories. So I am super excited to invite you to join today's guest. But before I do that, I just want to mention that if you do want to take part in the chat, we can see your comments, we can interact with you. So if you're watching on a mobile or a tablet, just make sure you're watching from the YouTube app and you can participate there. Or if you're on a desktop computer, you can just log in on the right-hand side and take part in the chat. So let us know if you're here, if you're watching, we can see you. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to today's amazing guest, Turath. Please join me in welcoming her. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm so excited to be here. I am amazing. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this. It really is such an awesome project, and I'm very excited to be part of it.
I am so excited that the world brought us back together, and we'll
I
get
know.
into that later. I'm like, oh my
I
God,
know.
it's just crazy how the universe brings us all together. But before we do that, I would just love if you could, like, I know your background and your history, but if you could just tell the audience that's watching, tell us a little bit about your career background and you know, this amazing kind of career that you've carved out for yourself.
So I studied film and TV at uni, and so that's kind of like my little passion. And I was super lucky to end up working for a number of music, film, and TV companies. Super, super duper lucky to have had that chance. And my roles have spanned being a producer to being an editor to being in operations to now doing accounting. So pretty varied. And I've been lucky enough to be able to work for small companies, large companies, national, international, private, and public. And I guess the point, in all this career, interestingly, I got made redundant at the point at the point that I thought I had reached my peak back then. Um, so the whistle stop tour is I got made redundant. So I was like, all right, I'm out. So I left for a year and a half and worked and lived in Sri Lanka and Shanghai, and here I am. I'm now back, operations manager for a membership health company, which is timely in these times.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
whistle stop tour.
tell us where you're based right now.
So I'm in Kent, actually, in England. But my job is based in London.
Amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
So, I think outside of work, you have a lot of like projects that you're working on right now. So you're an operations manager for a membership health company, which we'll talk about what that means later. But tell us a little bit about outside of work, these like passions and these things that you're exploring.
All right. I was just saying to you, like, how busy the weekends are now. So I have a number of projects on the go, as well as my job, of course. So right now, I'm kind of flexing my creativity muscles. I'm playing around with photography and I'm playing around with editing. I'm really excited about that part. Like I love movies, and so like doing. I don't know if you've seen, but I do these movie soundtrack meditations where I grab like an amazing quote for a movie and I put it to the soundtrack, and it's my own personal take. So loving that process, and it just kind of connects me with being able to do that on the weekend, kind of connects me to my passion, so I never lose track. And then I'm also supporting my brother, TBT, the Bildung Tutors. So every Monday on Instagram Live at 7, we do these open seminars about no BS philosophy. So it's like none of the mystical stuff. It's not waffly. It's not, wishy-washy. It's just plain old reasoning where we get to talk about like philosophical subjects and how they affect our lives. And yeah, so that's what I do now, all on the side.
I love it because I've watched some of them,
I'm
and
so
it's like
happy.
philosophy in such yeah. I'm hoping that my connection stays okay here. I'm seeing a little issue, so
I
hopefully
have
we'll
to
keep
say, I'm
going.
I'm
But
seeing the same. I'm seeing the same.
okay, cool. I'm just gonna turn the Wi-Fi on really quick because, of course, as anybody that's watched any of my stuff knows, that I am very paranoid about Wi-Fi connections, and I got a new wired connection to try to overcome this, and it seems to have made it worse. So there we go. It's my
All right.
biggest fear. The thing out of my control is the Wi-Fi connection in Panama,
Well,
but it seems
we'll
to be okay.
we'll
So
just keep
we'll
going
go
until
for
we
it.
can't go no more.
So the chats that you do about philosophy is really interesting because I think everybody has this impression of like who or what people look like or sound like that talk about philosophy, and I'm not going to tell you what they sound like or how they talk about
I have
things,
an
but
image.
it's very unexpected and it's cool. Like I feel like the more that we can, and that's part of what I do with Unrestricted, is like bringing different voices and different backgrounds to talk about the idea of success, right? Because most of what's out there is these, you know, pale pink perfect model ideas of success, or these
Yeah.
guys that are like, I only sleep 4 hours a night, and I'm like, that can't be the only way. So different points of view, and what you guys do with your philosophy chats I think is really cool. So Turath's Instagram handle is down there at the bottom, so you can check that out too. And I think it's amazing that you know you guys are putting this idea out there, and making philosophy accessible to people that wouldn't resonate with those, like, typical things we think of, like old buttoned up white men talking about philosophy.
Exactly. So listen, there's like a mini personal story to this, and I don't know if my brother would
Ooh.
mind. But anyway, so my brother is a PhD in philosophy, and we're super duper close. The whole family is super duper close. But I found that whenever I had problems, it was really nice to go to him, although he's like 7 years my junior. But to go to him, and the way he thinks in that philosophical mindset, and it's not a specific mindset, anybody has this, but the way he was able to reason and get me to understand my problems, I suddenly thought, gosh, I wish I could share you with the world, and then anybody who has this problem could be like, aha. And so
Yeah.
this came about, and I'm loving it. It's just, every week we chat about something, and I have to say, there are times where I'm genuinely blown away, like, oh my God, I didn't understand the world like this. So yeah, I'm loving it.
It's amazing how conversations can do that. And it was much the same inspiration for this podcast. It was having one of my 4 hour long chats with one of my girlfriends. Like we had a 2 hour chat yesterday, and I was just like, oh my God, I should be recording these and sharing it, because like we have these interactions or these moments or these people in our life that bring us so much joy or clarity or support, and being able to put that out in the world is pretty amazing. But I am getting a little bit off topic, but I just wanted to give a shout out for what you guys are doing, because I love it. I mean, you have one of the most incredible stories of how you ended up in the UK. And I would love if you could like share it, because I mean, you talk about movies. I hope you're writing a script or something about this. It's pretty epic.
It's pretty fantastical. Honestly, I feel sometimes I feel like people won't believe me when I tell them, but it's the absolute truth. And um, and a lot of the story I've misplaced because of trauma, and I'll tell you in a minute. But every time I speak to my parents, I get a new tiddly bit, and it fills in the
Mm.
gaps, and I'm like, really, that's what happened. So the another whistle stop tour, I'm from Iraqi originally, but I was born in Lebanon. So the mini story is that mum had to leave for political reasons. Iraq has been an upheaval for time now, but particularly at that time. Um, so mum had to leave the country, and then meanwhile my father is up in the mountains, defecting from the army, and you don't do that back then. um, and then, I get born, and 2 years later, war kicks off, in Lebanon. So this is Israel, Lebanon, 1981, I think, in 1982. So war kicks off, and I recall, hearing the shelling, and being taken down to the bunkers, and you don't understand what the hell is going on at that age. But I remember, I think I was mentioning to you yesterday, I remember the smell of the bunkers. It had a very particular, unique smell that if I were to smell it now, I'd know it immediately. And somehow, one way or another, we survived. I didn't tell you a bit of the story yesterday. So I have this memory. My teacher and my mother, very close friends, and we go up to our house, and I remember kind of standing and facing the window of our apartment, and my mother and teacher are kind of chopping carrots in the kitchen. I remember that very distinctly. And the next minute I know the glass implodes, and then I remember nothing. Mum tells me that we got taken out of the building. I don't recall. So I've got huge chunks of my memory gone. And then to end the story, the and again, I don't remember. This is all everything my mother's told me. But and then another time there was another shelling, and this time my mother was affected directly. She was directly hit and directly injured. So much so that when they took her to hospital and I was taken to see her, she tells me that I said to her, "That's not my mum." She was so disfigured that I didn't even recognize her. And I, and she tells me what happened that day. Of course, she went to work, I went to school, and of course that day my mother didn't come to pick me up, and I ended up living with my teacher for God knows how long, because mum was off healing and dad was off somewhere in the mountains. And yeah, so that's my whistle stop tour of my background. And believe me, it's true. It's all true.
So tell us a bit about, so you were unintentionally orphaned,
Orphaned.
right? Like you didn't recognize your mom, and then your mom was sent to Russia. Your dad was trying to get out of the army, and you end up not getting picked up at school and living with your teacher. So what was the next? How did you end up getting to the UK? Because this
Oh,
isn't the end
yeah.
of this
No,
story.
this isn't. Oh gosh, our adventure, our odyssey doesn't end there. So, I remember we went to Syria, right? So, mom and I then moved out of Lebanon and into Syria. And at one point, I remember being woken up in the middle of the night, getting shoved in a taxi. Mom and I in a taxi and drove for hours north to the mountains, and that's where I met my father for the first time ever. I was, you know. And it was very surreal. So then we lived in Syria, and then we moved to Cyprus. But meanwhile, when I mentioned my dad had defected, they were after him. That was the whole point. That's why we had to keep leaving. And then eventually we came as political refugees into the UK. Yeah, and that's the yeah. We moved around quite a bit.
And so you guys were, running away from the potential impact of your father deciding, that he didn't want to be in the military anymore, which is a totally reasonable thing to do. But you guys were fearing for your lives and the safety of your family. You sought refuge in the UK. And what did they do to you when you got there?
Well, the second we arrived, so at the time when I arrived into the UK, I was 10 years old, and my brothers would have been like 4 and 2. No, even, yeah, 4 and 2 or 3 and 1, something really, really small. I was 10. And the second we arrived into the UK, the first thing they did, of course, is stick us in a cell. Good old immigration. And we were there for hours, hours on end. And I remember at some point it had gotten so late in the day, they realized and brought us food. And I remember there was this apple on the tray and they were trying to give it to me to eat. And all I did was take one look at my mother and see that utter, anger in her. And I was like, nope, not eating. I refused to eat that day. And they kept trying to cajole me with this apple. It was very surreal. And then eventually they realized when I wasn't going to give in, they let us out because, I don't think they would have wanted a child dying of starvation on their hands.
There you go. 10-year-old goes on a hunger strike, saves her family from being kept in a cell when they're seeking refuge, fearing for their lives. I mean, it's so interesting to like hear, because we hear about people going into cages now and what happens when people are seeking political refuge, and you experience this, this, like you
Mind
were
there's
you
an element where I still think, as bad as those times were, and there were some seriously bad times that, we need not go into. But even so, I still think the situation has gotten worse and worse and worse. I believe I was lucky. We came at a time when the country was slightly more accepting to this concept than nations are now. It's kind of despicable and unacceptable how, nations around the world have been rejecting refugees in these crises. It baffles the mind. So despite all that, my family was lucky.
yeah, I think most of us will never ever be in a situation where we're in the kitchen chopping carrots and the glass gets blown in because a bomb goes off near us. So it's pretty surreal to hear, like, actually hear a story from somebody that you know so well, and it's like I only heard this story for the first time today,
Yeah.
and heard the story of your mother getting bombed and getting saved by this splinter that used to like irritate
Yeah.
her every day.
Yeah.
So it's pretty incredible, and I'm really interested, like, how that early experience shaped your view of the world. Like, how has that manifested in your life?
So I would say it took me years to possibly figure this out, but let's set the scene. So, in a world of utter confusion and loss as a child, right? It seemed like the only thing I managed to do in order to survive was to try and organize the madness, right? So, and I can say that in all my life, so in every job that I took, in every phase of my life, whenever I encountered chaos, I burnt myself out trying to fix it because clearly I had earlier trauma that was like, no, 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 we don't want madness. But I would say that I feel like I'm entering a new phase. So I'm still trying to put order to the world. I'm still trying to fix the chaos. The difference now I'm finding is I'm trying to do it in harmony with others and my conditions. Whereas before, I remember trying to affix my way onto the world. Like, no, this is how things work. You must do it my way. And now I'm realizing actually there's no such thing as my way and your way. There's no such thing. There's a harmonious way we all want to arrive at, and that's the little new fine skill I'm trying to fix now.
Which is so incredible, like thinking when we came back into each other's lives. So when I met Turath, um, I was working at Guinness World Records and she was coming in about to be my fourth line manager. And managing me is no easy feat because I'm very much like Turath. Like, I like to organize everything. I like to do things my way. I'm very gregarious. Like, it's I see the way that things need to be done. And yes. So and it was very much a protective mechanism for me as well. I had things that happened to me early in life where the way that I could feel like in control of what was going on was kind of control the things around me, and that's a natural tendency. I think when you
Yeah,
have trauma, it's like what can I control within my environment
yeah,
that will make me feel safer, because it's that fear of like losing control. So
yeah.
like I resonate with so much of that, even though I didn't have any of the and not nearly as horrific experiences as you did, but Turath turned up and I was like, okay, I'm going to show her who's boss. And I marched right up to her and I was like, I am Athena. And her response to me was one of those lessons that didn't actually resonate until recently. And it's really interesting because we both had this thought of like contacting each other after all these years. I mean, that was back in 2014 at the exact same time. Like I literally had this like, I need to speak to Turath. And she got in touch with me the next day. And it's so interesting how our journey has gone very similar because we're both now looking at like, okay, very
Yeah.
organized people. And how do we use this skill to enable greatness around us
Yeah.
rather than trying to control everyone and
Exactly.
control our environment. It's like we have these skills, this knowledge where we can enable people to like learn from our ways of thinking that most people don't have,
Yeah.
as frustrating as it used to be for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a kind of like long-winded, but the what Tarath did in that moment, instead of being it was definitely an intimidation play for me. And it's something that has been a really conscious kind of awareness of sisterhood and also women in the workplace. And we were brought up in environments where there was scarcity available for women in the workplace. I particularly came up in like, radio and live music production and events, which was very male dominated. So I very much
Wow.
had to be this like direct man approach, and that was kind of my go-to when I was feeling uncomfortable or when I was feeling intimidated. It's like I'm gonna put it out there, right? And what I've talked about quite a few times on the podcast, and something that's made me, I've had a realization over the last couple of years, is like this idea of sisterhood and supporting other women, and the negative talk that we have or the way that we treat each other, because we were brought up in this very like male dominated culture, where there wasn't
Yeah.
availability for us to advance. So we had to kind
Yeah.
of like step on each other rather than support each other. But when we start supporting each other and really being like, yes, queen, come into your amazingness, like we all rise as a result of that. So Tarath was like, she saw me and she had a very different reaction than most people would to me being like, I'm here, so what?
I remember that day very fondly, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this with the world. I kind of want to share my mini love of you. Just to reciprocate, meeting you for the first time. My God, like I just remember being blown over by you. You came up to me and I was like, whoa, bring it. I was like, give it to me. I know you're going to be super great. And for me, you were like a firecracker. There was nothing I had to do. You already knew everything you had to do. You knew your job damn well. You were so good at it. I was thinking yesterday, I turned up to one of your events, and honestly, even then, I remember like, oh my God, she even remembered these details. So yeah, I just wanted, and I recognized that there had been, a deficit management before me. The fact that it made you and others react that way. So I was like, all right, let's hear what they have to say. And so yeah, I came in and I don't know, I just wanted to be of support to you. You had it.
But it's one of those things that, and we have so many topics to kind of like
Yeah.
peel apart. So I'm gonna talk about we want to talk about management, but first I want to talk about sisterhood, because you treated me in a spirit of sisterhood rather than trying to dampen this thing that I was. And you saw me for what I was. You saw through what I was doing. It was like it was a fear coming out in terms of intimidation, but you saw it as, yeah, I think you described it, excitement. But you recommended a book to me, The
Oh,
Heroine's Journey,
yeah.
which was very much about like these cycles that women go through and their relationships to their parents and their ancestors. And it was a different language to me, and I got it and I read it, and I was just like, okay. And I recommended it to my mom, and then years later it was like, oh my God, I'm starting to get it. And then the day before you got in touch with me, I discovered the copy of the book that I got from my
Oh,
mother. It was so random. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about, how you view sisterhood, being a woman, and like, just this collective thing that we have as being women.
so I'll tell you this. I believe it's a fantasy, to put it in a nutshell, and I'll explain why. We're born, and somehow there's this thing called woman at some point we're supposed to become, right? All through childhood, you're treated differently, and you don't understand what's going on in the world, and you see your brothers and your friends being treated differently, and none of that makes sense to a girl. And somehow, miraculously, she's supposed to arrive at this quote unquote woman and act accordingly. And I never got that.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily for me, I was super duper lucky. Again, my parents never once tried to kind of put me down. Or I remember this instance where my dad was just like, yeah, you sit at the front of the taxi, yeah, you pay him. And that gave me a sense of, this isn't about male and female, right? This is about what you can do. And again, I'm lucky. But in regards to sisterhood, look, I think that something happens, and this is why that book was so fascinating. You go through these phases, these emotional turmoils, right? You go through phases of loving and hating yourself. And then in turn, you realize, really, that's not about myself. I love and hate my mother, and then you realize, gosh, it's much bigger than that. I have these complicated feelings about my father, and I don't know who I am in the world. And then you don't know how to deal with any of that. And it creates, and then you end up in the workplace, and then you treat people badly because you don't know what the hell happened.
Mm.
And so I read that book, and it made me understand that the specific emotional journey I went through with my mum was pivotal. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an aberration. There wasn't something wrong with me. It was perfectly normal, to engage in the fears and the, and the anxieties, and then the happiness and the joy to. And because I had then I recognized that perhaps every woman I encounter is probably in the same place, or is probably stuck in a zone that she doesn't quite understand, because it hasn't been explained to her. Because why would they explain that to you? You're just a thing that we want you to be,
Mm.
ultimately. So to end on all of that, my what I always wanted to do is to treat humans like who you are. And that's what I say at Guinness World Records. I came and I just wanted to hear your stories. I didn't care. And I made a point of saying that to you guys during our one-to-ones. Like, I don't care. To an extent, I don't care about the job. I care about what you want and how we get
Mm.
about to what you need, because that's what builds the rest. And so that's what I mean by sisterhood. It was to recognize that we're all potentially hurting, and we could all, if I could just explain this thing to you, then you'd explain something to me, and we'd move past all these mini pointless human dramas, that need not happen if we just talk directly to each other. So yeah.
I think it was again something that didn't resonate until much later, because we don't often get those types of opportunities in the workplace, right? Like, we're ingratiated with this idea that we need to work a certain way, or act a certain way, or speak a certain way, and we kind of do this to each other as well, like, I would even catch myself like, oh, she's got kids, so she gets to leave early, kind of thing. And it's like awful, but it was actually me being like a little bit jealous that, she had boundaries, or she had this thing that I was not able to do for myself. So, having someone that was like, I actually care about you. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this,
Yeah.
like, it was so different. It was such a different style. And it's really like landed with me now, which I think is why you started coming back into my mind. It was like, this whole exploration and realization of like supporting other women. It really started with you, and you giving me a tool that made absolutely no sense to me for years and years and years. And I finally got it. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today, and I think hopefully this is a good segue into that, is, identity crises and these identities that we feel like we need to fulfill, or these identities that were imprinted on us that maybe we're not questioning. So you have a really cool kind of like outlook about identities and identity crises.
Yeah, well, I guess in terms of the background, in a way, because I had to, let's say, adjust to so many changes in my life, countries and traumas and wars and so on and so forth. That at this moment in time, I find myself, I don't know if I can tell you that I have a specific quote unquote identity or self, as it's commonly understood. And I believe that every identity or every person is like this. We're all layered with experiences and nuances and ups and downs and lessons and missed opportunities. And what I do want to say is, I think the mistake that I see we're making currently is we're all going out there trying to find ourselves. Like, it's not out there. There's nothing to find out there. It's all just in here. You're not, a split personality that you become a different thing. The thing to arrive at, though, it was, rather than kind of going out there and trying to search for this quote unquote self, I would argue that actually you do the opposite. That in fact you need to sit down for 2 minutes, shut the noise, quiet your mind. And then what hopefully you'd come to understand is that we're not one thing. We're not this or that. We're not him or her. We're not good or bad. These dualities are pointless. But really, we're all these things. It's not just in ourselves, but amongst everyone and everything. And I don't want to sound fluffy. This is really important. There's an element where I want to say, our capitalist states and systems want us to have an individual self. It benefits their pockets for us to be like, I'm unique and there's only one like me. And there is, in fact, only one like you, but not with that mindset. That's the wrong mindset. So, so I would say, imagine if we just, for a minute, if we just stopped looking for these identities and instead got together to do things correctly, and I would reference the movements that are happening right now across the world in remembrance of George Floyd. Believe me, there is an identity there, but it's not individualized. It's successful precisely because it's what we all want, what's universally right and just. That identity, not about myself or what. So
Yeah.
So I hope that's answered your question in a long-winded way.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're having a conscious awakening. I just want to pull up some love that you're getting from Geomyra really quick. She says, it's so amazing that you've been through so much and still have such a beautiful and positive attitude. And I echo that. I think when you go through like horrific experiences, oftentimes that can define you in a way that like you become victim to it, or you rise above that. And clearly, like, you've done a lot of work to get to this point. I don't think you go through those kinds of things and are just miraculously like, we're all one with the universe and we're all a collective. So I think it's really evident that you've clearly done a lot of things and a lot of great work to get to this point. And with these movements that are happening, with this pandemic that's happening, like, our whole world is basically being like upended and shaken out. And we're faced with time to have discussions with ourselves that we didn't have before. We're faced with the reality that everything we knew is going to be completely different. We're also faced with either, people might see it a barrier or an opportunity. So this is an opportunity to redesign what we want our lives to look like what is important to us, because the things that we thought were important are being taken away. Like, we're not like that life that we had, that we carried on with, the busyness, the commute, the this, the that, the jobs, like, some of that stuff it's really being questioned. So you serve as an inspiration for going through quite horrific times and coming out well out of that. So, how can we take this idea of what's happening right now and maybe remove ourselves from the identity that we think like we're beholden to?
No, I feel like we're at a right time. It feels like genuinely a pivotal moment in history. Something is changing, and especially with the pandemic. You know, as awful as it is, and it's awfully sad that so many have died due to the mismanagement of states. It didn't need to be that bad. Nevertheless, I feel like we're being afforded a moment. Being at home and being locked down, we're being afforded a moment to reconsider and to rethink and to you've watched all Netflix. It's done. Sit down. Sit down and think about your life. If we want, we're doers, right? We constantly want to change,
Mm.
affect our future, and we think this affectation or this doing is by literally doing things, and it's not always the case. Sometimes, in fact, it's the lack of doing. It's precisely the non-doing that helps you arrive at that point. I want to say, and I think you'd probably agree, a lot of what you and I do is planning, right? And that's what I'm suggesting we apply to all our life, a sense of planning. Sit down, figure out where you came from, what issues did you face back then, how did it make you feel, what is it you want to achieve, is it achievable, do you want it really, what do you dream for yourself, and these answers will not, I tell you now, they're not going to come immediately, absolutely not, fact. But you have to be curious, you have to want to get over. I mentioned to you yesterday, I went through a phase when I moved into this flat of mine. I went through a phase, solid year, of like almost saying to myself, it's time to face the demons, no more running away. These things that I've hidden away, these little characteristics or these little, it's time to face them. And then I have these moments where they come out. I'm like, aha, now I see you. And
Mm.
swear to you, it's not magic, it's not fluffy. The second your brain does that switch of like, I see what it is, it stops having a hold on you. You're no longer paralyzed into not knowing how to fix yourself or how to change your life or how to do the right thing, or it's all possible then. As soon as you clear this, it's all here.
So that's like an amazing segue, and bear with me because I'm gonna bring productivity into this
Oh,
and organization, and it's something that's like super close to me and Turath's heart. But often the question I get is like, how is planning, organization, keeping a calendar, doing time management going to afford me the ability to feel unrestricted, right? And I think you and I come from the end of the spectrum where we were so regimented and so organized that we've started to realize like how we can apply this to our personal lives to start unlocking these things. Because actually, for most people, all this stuff that's swirling around in their head, they don't know how to deal with it or how to even get started on doing something about it. So these things that just bury themselves in the back of our head that we replay over and over and over again and cause us like untold anxiety. And we're project managers, so we're like, I'm getting this out of my head, I'm organizing it, I'm telling it who's boss, and then we'll see what's what. So um, I ran a to-do list challenge, over a week ago, where I took people on a journey of like, actually putting yourself first and putting the things that are important to you first and spending time planning and chunking things down and all these things that as project managers are just like natural to
yeah.
us. And it was only on the final day that I was like, okay, now you can plan your day, and it's really cool to be able to like use these skills that used to feel really restrictive to help people like unlock this ability to feel like they're so in control that they feel free. So it's a long-winded kind of segue into like, you're an operations manager. So tell us what that entails, and also, you know, how you've evolved in your thinking of like how you act as an operations manager as time has gone on.
Okay, so I do want to say that I believe the world has this notion that operations is this like magical potion. You love what it says on the bottle, and then as soon as you have it in your organization, you forget what it's about, and it's probably the first to be let go of. It is mystical to some people because it doesn't quite appear like we're doing anything, but we're doing a lot. We are doing a lot. But
If nothing is going wrong, we're doing our job really well.
Exactly. But it's very unnoticeable, right? But it's very mechanical at the same time, and I'll go through it. But I kind of want to kind of make it personal a bit, akin to how I grew up. So, back to my love of film and television. When I was younger, I really wanted to be an actress because, I love being on stage, and I had a booming voice, and I know I could reach the last person in the stalls. But then I was like, no, that's not enough for me. I want to be a director because, at that time when I grew up, I wanted to create my own world then. And then I was like, nah, that's still not good enough for me. I grew up some more. And then I noticed there was this person behind all the noise, sitting there quietly engaged in her task, diligently and efficiently creating schedules and managing budgets, and creating processes. And ultimately, therein is your operations manager. So, given my history, I have been very lucky, really, to be in a role where I can exact order on things. I'm very lucky to be able to do what it is I do because because of the conditions that I was raised in. And so even, no matter how seemingly small or insignificant, every little bit I do in terms of operation helps me to refine my skills. But I'll speak generally now, kind of very generically about ops management. So ops management is about that person who can see into the future, right? You were telling me this joke a little bit earlier.
Yes.
They have the
We can, well, yeah, I mean, to preface on that, I've been in, project management or event management or, this sort of like productivity optimization thing for so long. I joke with people. It was on my dating profile. It's like, I can see in the future, and they're like, oh, what's my future? I'm like, it doesn't work like that. But I can tell you where things are going to go wrong when I start seeing your process.
That's exactly it. So, in terms of seeing the future for us, what does that mean? It's basically this person who's able to perceive a number of variables in the future. We kind of go, if that happens, then this or this and that might happen along the line, and therefore let's do this plan, right? That's ultimately what an operations manager does, seeing variables and planning for them. Behind the scenes also, in order to be able to be so effective, you have to have a knowledge of a great many things, right? You have to know HR law, you have to know about salaries and taxes and employee rights and contracts and finances, let alone project management and human skills and creativity, adaptability. But anyway, I'd say the starting point to any ops manager is ultimately what happens is a company kind of suddenly realizes, gosh, we've been doing the same thing and for so long, and maybe it's time we kind of operationalized it. And so an ops person comes in. Usually when I come into a company, the first month or two, I try to stay in the outer circles, so to speak. The purpose of this is to observe things as they are. Like, what are people doing currently? How are they working currently? And then my next stage is going around and asking everybody, look, if all things were possible, what would you want for yourself? What would you want for your job? What would you want for this company? And then after that process, then comes my favorite bit of all time. It's the bit where you disappear into the shadows, and all you're trying to do is to, plot out the dots between where we are and where we ultimately want to be. And then the rest of the process, honestly, I feel like, 90% of the rest of my job is, cajoling and convincing and agreeing and changing and, so that we can collectively arrive at a solution. That's it. That's it in a nutshell, I would say.
I think he's just so beautifully like defined how we can do this for ourselves, right? Like if you were to be an ops manager for your own self,
Yeah.
like that observation period of just starting to like get present with like what's causing me stress and like when am I getting stressed and like what do I feel in this situation? and then you start mapping out, well, okay, and I think that's what we're all going through right now, right? Like we're observing, like, okay, our total world has changed, and like what's going on, and a lot of people are getting lost and drinking or Netflix or whatever, and other people are actually sitting with it and observing it. So like once you're observing it, it's like, okay, well, what do I want?
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about ourselves as like being vehicles. If you don't know your destination, it's going to be really difficult to get there. And at the same time, you need to keep your vehicle really well maintained. You need to make sure the gas tank is full. So without knowing our destination, and it doesn't have to be like some crazy, like I need to achieve this by this many
Yeah.
years or whatever. It can be a lot more like, I would like to feel content. That was the word for me when I left London last year and sold everything and reduced everything down to a couple suitcases. I was like, this elusive contentedness, I've never felt it in my life. Like that's what I want. I want to feel content. So, but it gives you a destination. And then once you know the destination and once you've got your like machine all tuned up, then it's really easy to start getting there and plotting out the way. But it does take a lot of convincing and negotiation, because there's going to be the roadblocks or the things that come up, these demons that like come out, and like it's like get distracted by like, oh, there's the biggest turnip over there, do I go look at it or do I stay on my path? So
I'll tell you,
that
like,
that that, that haven't really refined that, but I just the way you were talking about an organization, because we do this, and this is what I kind of built my career on as well, is like going in, seeing how people are doing something, creating systems and optimizing it to make it perform better, particularly in the last couple of years working with like entrepreneurs and businesses. It's like if you tweak this and this, or
yeah,
change this and this, or operate, you're gonna go like that instead of
yeah,
going like that or
yeah.
like that.
I did want to say, one thing in terms of this, knowing who you are and knowing where you want to get to, and then, simply plotting it. And I can talk later, actually. I have solid ideas on how to go about doing that. But the one thing I do want to say is it's important to be kind to yourself, right? It's not always going to work, and it's certainly not going to work by some some random timeline you've created in your mind. We are controllers of ourselves. Yes, absolutely. If you say I'm going to do something by Sunday, yes, absolutely, you can. There's discipline involved. But I would say, like, for example, the reason why I say it's a perfect and pivotal time is a lot of people are talking about the right thing, but I don't think they're really doing it yet. So I hear
Mm.
lots of talk of meditation. I hear lots of talk of Zen. I hear lots of talk of similar things. But I don't hear enough of people sitting down and genuinely engaging in this process. It's tedious, it's time consuming. You have to put in the time, but at the same time, you have to be kind to yourself if it doesn't happen. So, for example, when I meditate sometimes, I'm just not into it. Sometimes I'm just not in it. I can't shut my brain up. And then I'm like, it's all right. At least you sat down. And then I know next time I'm like, all right, clear your mind. And then I can do that. Right. And it's that process. When you're planning for your life, it doesn't go wrong. It's all right. Get up, do it again the next day, go to sleep, have an off day. It's all right. So yeah, be kind to yourself is the lasting message I want to leave.
It's a lot easier said than done,
Yeah.
that idea of being kind to yourself, because, I doing nourishing things for your body, eating a certain way, doing the meditation, all of that, and I've been doing that for quite a long time now. And I thought I was being kind to myself. And I told you yesterday, I caught myself telling myself off for the stupidest things, like I spilled coffee beans in my kitchen and I was like, you effing idiot. And I was like, why are you talking to yourself like that, girl? Like, what purpose does that serve? And it's like these voices. And it's only when you start doing the stuff, right? Doing the meditation, doing the treating yourself well, removing the substances, like it's layers and layers and layers. And you keep uncovering these
Yeah.
little treasures
Yeah.
of opportunities to like, okay, now that thing is something that I would like to look at, because like, why am I talking to myself like that?
Yeah.
And I caught myself, once I had that realization that I talked to myself that way, I caught myself doing it several times throughout the day. So I was like, I must do this all the time, all the time. And there's this fear of not being perfect that I've been really trying to undo, because perfection is safety, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that's what with these early life experiences where we felt out of control and like, things were happening to us that we had no control over, the more we can control and be perfect, then maybe that won't happen again. So it's like these early traumas can really imprint themselves in a way. But the being kind to yourself, there are layers to that as well. And you're not going to get it right initially. And just doing simple things like having a leisurely coffee or taking a bath, and during nourishment and things that show yourself that you love yourself even if you don't feel that way, can have a massive impact. And that was one of the turning points for me, was realizing that I went to therapy a couple years ago, was in a really dark place with working myself to death, and my therapist was like, what do you do to nourish yourself? And I was like, like didn't do anything,
Yeah.
like it was first thing in the morning, grab the phone, freak out, and go and run to the desk and start working, and work myself so long that I didn't eat, I didn't get up and walk, I didn't do, so it can start very simply. But I guess that's my rant of like being kind to yourself. When you're not being kind to yourself, can almost feel like overwhelming and like you can't even get started. But there are little things that you can do, and leave yourself breadcrumbs to get to the point where you actually start feeling like you're being kind to yourself.
Yeah, and listen, and these are, and this is why, I bang on about it, but this is why these moments in the day when, call it meditation, call it spending time with yourself, call it whatever, I don't mind. But those moments that you allocate in the day where you're not engaging in a thing outside of yourself, you're not doing a task for work, you're not going shopping, you're not doing an errand, you're just sitting here, not having to engage anything. And it's hard to do. Your brain is wired to work, right? And imagine, 24 hours a day, you're consuming things, you're processing things. Somebody said something a particular way, you heard a funny, you're processing so much in the day. And just because we think we get up every morning and manage to do it all over again, that we're okay, that's a fallacy. And I've been in situations where I've worked myself to the bone, where literally my hair fell out, like literally. And it's not worth it. You get to a point where, and then you get made redundant, and then you go, what was the point?
I
But
think you
all of
kind
that,
of did that to yourself though, almost. Like you were so good, you like got yourself out of there. It's
oh
amazing
man,
how the
it
universe
honestly is one
works.
of the best things that happened to me. This is the thing, life is going to happen, and bad things are going to happen, and then good things are going to happen. I have a story about that from childhood, but another time. Good things, bad things, they're ever changing, and they're ever moving, and they're ever evolving. You really can't ever control your situation. That's never going to happen. So what needs to happen is the adaptability to bad things happening, right? The worst
Mhm.
happens. What next? Have that in your mind. What's the next recourse? Rather than when COVID-19 hits and everybody goes out and buys all the toilet tissue in the entire world, forward planning, like at the worst case scenario, what do I want for myself? What do I want around me? How am I going to deal with this? If I have to face death's door, if I'm at death's door, I would like to be there gracefully, and having sorted out my demons from childhood, so that's why that's a lot of time is really important, to have that moment to reconsider things, to think about the things that would never come to you because you're engaged in other activities.
It was interesting as you were talking about like death's door and like the worst that could happen. I started feeling like my chest tighten up, and I think that can be really scary for people to like really think about like the worst possible scenario. But sometimes if we just get it out, and I do this by journaling. So like when I start feeling that physical sensation, if I start actually writing out like what is causing that and play it out in worst case scenario, then I kind of almost like write myself out of it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and then I literally start giving myself a pep talk, because once you
yeah,
see it in front of you and you like pull that demon out of your head and you start facing it, and you're like,
yeah.
it's like, okay, cool. Actually, no, I'm doing good things, and you got this, and it's all good, and whatever. So, I think finding a way to express that apart
Yeah.
from just like leaving it in your head
Yeah.
can be really, and you're right, like if the worst case scenario is scaring you and you're not taking time to like think about or process what that is, get it out and like face it, and actually those things that we thought were really scary that are like floating around in our head are not as bad when we're kind of like, okay, come on out, I want to have a conversation, sit down, let's
Exactly.
do this.
Exactly. And honestly, I speak from personal experience. I have one, two things that, it's not to say I'm by any stretch of the imagination perfected. I'm still working on myself, but I can tell you there were a couple of, I know, anxieties I had from the past, and there were hairy moments, when I was like, "Now let's do this. I'm sick and tired of not having to deal with this. Bring it on," and it comes out, and of course you
Mm.
cry, you heaving sobs for like several hours, but then it's done, it's out, and then next time it happens, you're like, I see you can't trick me again, it's valuable work, honestly.
I love crying because, like, I mean, it feels awful in the moment, but when you're done, you're almost kind of like,
Cathartic.
ah, like it's almost like, okay, I got it out. And now I'm clear. And like, it's
Yeah,
not that bad. It's like, I
exactly.
don't know what chemically happens in your body when you cry, but I almost feel like it's some weird dopamine rush or
Yeah,
like some
I
like,
do believe so, and you release it. It is very cathartic. It's good for you.
so one of the things we were talking about is management, and we kind of started on that earlier in the conversation. And I really like your view on management, but I think it's such an important part of all of our lives because we're either managing other people or being managed by other people. So tell us a little bit about your philosophy around management.
So I kind of want to start out by being controversial. And the controversy is there's a misconception, I would like to argue, that people out there believe that anyone can become a manager. And I believe that's a fallacy. There are people in the world who are destined to be teachers because they have that patience. There are people in the world who are great doctors, and then there are managers. They're not, and not any, random person can just suddenly rise up and do it well. People do it, but it's not to do it well. So my philosophy in terms of management is quite simple. To manage others, it's like a mother. It would be grotesque if it was about her, right? So similarly, when I'm managing someone, I recognize that this is absolutely not about me. This is about you, what you do, what you achieve. My simpler existence is, how do I help you get there? That's how I got to, the reason why I'm managing you is because I somehow know those skills that I can help you get to the next phase. And I have the genuine belief that who runs the company are the people who are doing the things, the doers. I my love and faith are in these people. These are the people who make things happen. It is not the billionaires, and it's not the upper echelons of the management who, it is not. And this is me continuing my controversy, but I believe in the workers, and I want to be there for you guys, and I want to help you out. And I believe that's what a manager ought to do. Facilitate your needs, kind of get you to excel. Because if you excel, everything works.
I think this is such a like loaded conversation for me because I mean I talked a little bit about like I've not done well with most managers in the past because a lot of managers try to get you to do things their way instead of giving you the time and space to figure out your own way. And also as now being in the position where I manage other people, I realize like it is a full-time job, and we're not taught any sort of skills on how to manage people unless we take it upon ourselves to actually learn how to manage people. But very few, as you mentioned, very few people in the population are naturally good managers. And yet, as we progress in our careers or our lives, we are given these responsibilities, which is like it's another person's well-being almost.
Yeah,
So, we hear all
exactly.
those stats about like people leave bad managers, but we never, as a as a population or in society or whatever, we don't teach people how to be managers. And we also don't recognize that people have different strengths, they have different abilities, they have, different personalities in terms of like introversion, extroversion, empathy, etc. And yet we make everybody be a manager if they
Yeah.
want to be able to
Yeah.
progress in their careers. And it was interesting for me because I have managed people, and I know in that moment I am being a bad manager because it's like that I don't have the skill set necessarily to know how to do this right. And I also have my own duties and things that I feel like I need to get done. And it's crazy because when I'm a project manager, when I'm not responsible for people's like well-being and that sort of thing, it's like cool. I can rally a team, I can make events happen, like I can get everybody super motivated. But when I was in management roles, it was like I hadn't necessarily had tons of experience with how it was done right, or when I did it, I didn't necessarily like take the time to like learn from that, or
Yeah.
we're not taught in school how to be managers. So it's crazy to me that this system that we've created is so reliant on cultivating talent and bringing people into their own skills and making them feel validated and useful, and like their direct contribution, it has some impact, because it's so personal to us, our jobs. Yet, most of what ends up impacting our careers or experiences is how we were managed.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, I want to be contrary to even to myself now. On the one hand, I absolutely say that not everybody is designed to be a manager, but at the same time, I don't feel it's an insurmountable task. The little trick here to how to manage people, or how to look after others, simply, let's put it like that, how to look after others, it could be in any context, is
Mm-hmm.
simply to remove the I, right? It's simply to remove the ego. This is not about you, and I do a lot of listening. I figure when I come into a company, certainly for the first time, I know very little. So what I want to do is hear what you do. How do you do it? What do you want to achieve? Because you've been here, you've been in the ground, you've been working it. Who am I to come in here and go, no, it's all wrong, let's do it my way? I can't possibly do that. You're the expert. What I can do is it's a process of, it's building relationships, right? I want to gain your trust, and then I want us together, so I can be like, but have you considered it this way? And you go, actually, yeah, very, and then we have that kind of dynamic, engaging conversation. That's where exciting stuff happens, rather than some person who's so concerned with themselves and their success, and then belittling you by telling you how to do your job. I absolutely, I find that reprehensible. But there's a way out, is to recognize the I, remove it, and then act accordingly.
I think also like companies just keep lobbing like line reports on people, but don't reduce their
Mm,
responsibilities, at the same time as well. So we put just added pressure on people. It's like, oh, you need to deliver everything you did
yeah,
before, plus more, plus hit these targets. Oh, and by the way, manage like 8 people. What? Like one person is enough. And then people are like, so that this whole idea of management, I think is really interesting. And like now that this opportunity for people to work at home, it's like the micromanagement it's like it's really an opportunity for people to be like independent and kind
yeah,
of learn how to like manage themselves. And also
yeah,
it's like forcing communication, because I think a lot of this comes down to our ability to communicate. We're not taught to communicate in a way that like honors ourselves. So again, it's like this leftover like patriarchal system where there are no emotions at work, right? Like there is no, like, you just, in the way it was done before, and these structures that we still live within, it's like you go into a workplace, you stay there for 20 years, you just get your head down, do your job, and that's it. But now, and as you were talking, I was thinking about the difference in young people now, like Gen
yeah,
Z, they go into a place and they're like, if I don't believe in what you stand for, if I don't feel like I'm looked after, if I don't feel like I'm valued, I'm out of here,
yeah.
and like good for them. And I kind of resented it at first. I was like, how do you know how hard I worked? And like, I was physically abused, coming up in my career. And then I was like, whoa, like actually they got it right. And the reason why I'm angry about it is because they've got it right. So now we have these like warring worlds between, people just want to work to be able to live rather than living to work. So, and we're all kind of like evolving with this consciousness is happening now. And this idea that we don't need to control other people,
Yeah.
like shifting to, like you said, taking the I out of it. But like, you can't control people when they're not in a desk where you can check in every minute and like micromanage them and stuff like that. So it's a really interesting time, and it's going to be really interesting to see how like management and structures and workplaces evolve, because I don't think it works for people like us, for people that are different. There's outliers. And I never felt like any sort of corporate structure worked for me because it was so rigid and restricted, and I needed to do things a certain way, and I was not allowed to speak out. Or when I did speak out, it was like dampened, or, I was tried to control, or my desk was moved 6 times just to keep disrupting me, like it's just crazy. So I'm definitely a person that's like, yeah, that structure does not work. I'm out of it. But there's still so much value in learning how to communicate with people and manage people and get the best out of people, and shifting that mindset of like, how can I enable you to be your best, because it benefits all of us. Absolutely. While maintaining my own boundaries, and looking after myself first.
Absolutely. I'll say again, I really believe it's a pivotal time. Everything is shifting right now, and it's an opportunity. As it was kicking off, I was thinking to myself, maybe this is a time when we can decide collectively that we want something other than this for our lives and for our working situations and for how we go about living. And I think things are beginning to change. We're seeing, companies here and there kind of, state that now it allows policy for anybody to work from home if they want to. Things are beginning to change. And with that change, eventually, I said to you, people suddenly realize, oh gosh, I think we need an ops manager. Eventually, companies will be like, oh gosh, change. Maybe we need somebody to help us along with this, So I hold hope.
So talk to me a bit about, I know we started to talk about this, but organization in your own life, how you went to the extreme, and how you now use organization as a tool to feel free, like you're within a system, with this job and everything, but you feel very like comfortable in that, and you're kind of designing your life while you're inside of that. So I try to explain to people why productivity, organization, structure actually allows you to be free. But I'd love to hear your view on it and kind of your journey with it as well, to go from like needing to control things to where you're at now.
Sure. So in terms of, I look at organization and productivity. So the way I see it is that you have a set of tools, right, that you can simply refine over years, and that to help you achieve optimum, maximum productivity and organization. The beauty of these tools is that you can use them individually, you can use them together, you can use them at different degrees, and and whatever the situation requires. So they're perfectly adaptable. And all they ask really is that you flex those muscles, use them, and they will give back to you. So the tools that I want to mention are 3 really. And firstly, it's our favorite, they're to-do lists. So the thing I do, I love a to-do list. So the thing I do want to say about a to-do list is I think people who are not used to making to-do lists kind of engage with it as this almost like forceful thing they have to do, and it's at the beginning it may feel forceful, but the thing I do want to say, a good to-do list is one that accepts adaptability. It is one that is dynamic, right? So when I make my to-do list, I mentioned to you earlier, I plan like 2-3 weeks in advance, right? I'm like, all these things are going to happen. Throughout the week, I'm dumping ideas on post-it notes because don't forget this. And the reason why I do that is because I want to keep my mind free, right? So if a thought comes up and I know at the time that it's important, I'm like, just write it down somewhere, and it's there, right? And then I come and I write my to-do list. And a to-do list for me is something I do all the time. So I have one at home and I have one at work, and it's forever evolving and it's forever changing. And somebody from the outside may look at it and go, all you do is to-do lists. And my answer to that is no, in fact, no, I'm refining my planning. Every day I redo my to-do list. The dynamism of it is today I know a little bit more than I did yesterday, or today suddenly I have a meeting and it's blown out my to-do list. So I have to accept the dynamism and the adaptability in order to change it. So approach to-do lists with adaptability. Accept that, the version you write may not be the version. Throw it away, start again, do a new one, and keep that process up. Remember, it's about refining those skills. The second one is organization. Again, obvious, and yet you say that to somebody and they go, I don't know what you mean. And I'm like, yeah, I get you. I know. I don't even know how to describe to you specifically what that means. Short of saying, ultimately, all it is cleaning and tidying, right? So I know I go through phases at work, for example, where I look at my folder and I'm like, it just needs a uniform way of titling things. At least now I know where things are, and it affords you the opportunity to look at things and go, and then you log information for later on. It's all useful. Every little bit of that thing that you think you didn't really need builds in knowledge for later when you really need it. And you don't want to be at that point going, where did I put the file? So cleaning and tidying. So to-do list, cleaning and tidying. And the third and last one is connecting the dots. By connecting the dots, I mean, remember what I mentioned earlier, where are you now? Where do you want to get to? What are the dots, right? Connecting the dots. And from designing that plan, from that connected dots, then you start to arrive at more to-do lists, more refined to-do lists, more, you have a better knowledge of, in fact, where are the priorities that, I need to establish. And the final thing I will say is, to know yourself. How do you like big tasks? Do you like small tasks? Do you feel anxiety? And it depends on the day. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't have the brain space to do this. Let's move it. And, and other times I look at my calendar and I'm like, I've got, a day completely free. I'm going to just tackle that big project and just like get out of the way. So know yourself, be kind, really be realistic. Can you do 2 tasks in a day? Do 2 tasks in a day. Don't plan for 6 and then feel miserable. Spread it out, So dynamic, adaptable to-do lists, tidying and cleaning, and connect the dots.
I love it. It's kind of like echoing a lot of the stuff that I teach people about productivity and what's going to be coming out in this coaching program that I'm running is teaching people like our way of thinking in a way that like puts themselves first, like your nourishment first, like filling up your tank, maintaining your vehicle, knowing your destination. And then all those other things are like really easy skills that, if you're not doing that other stuff, it feels like, how many to-do lists and how many folders and actually it's like, no, these are tools that like allow you your freedom, but it's really knowing yourself and knowing where you want to get to. And that can change day to day, but it's like, okay, today I would like to do this. And then it's like, okay, I've programmed my GPS and I know where I'm driving today. And it's like, oh, I've only got this much gas in the tank. So, I'm going to stop along here along the way. So it's a really cool thing when you start looking at organization and structure and optimization, not as something that's onerous and controls you, but actually it puts you in control. Because if you are not in the driver's seat, someone else or something else is. And we are failing that right now because a lot of our normal ways of life are taken away, So the only thing we can realistically control is like how we choose to go through this very unsettling process, like the only thing that's certain is nothing is certain. We might have Kanye for president next year in the US.
Don't say things like that.
I didn't think Trump or Brexit would happen. So, and it's like the 2020 bingo card, and it's almost like these things come up and I am just laughing now. I'm like, this just keeps getting better, you know? So it's like, but if we're looking after ourselves, if we're maintaining, you know, ourselves, our vehicle, and, you know, we're kind of like giving ourselves that time and space to nourish ourselves and learn ourselves, like organization becomes just another tool in your toolkit to be able to do that, as you said. So,
Yeah, and it's continuously being refined, right? Doing it and
mm,
redoing it, doing it and redoing it is not a failure. You're refining it. I really want to
you're
make that clear.
you learn from things though,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think we were talking about this yesterday, like even the most horrible situations that happen to you, you can learn from, you can take something from that, you know. And a lot of people get stuck in that space, myself included. When bad things happen, you ruminate on it and you beat yourself up about it. And, you know, breaking that pattern of, you know, I shouldn't have done that, as opposed to like, what can I learn from that,
yeah,
and how can I empower myself going forward from that? And, you know, there's nothing we can't figure out, you
yeah.
know, if it, with the right attitude and mindset, there's nothing we can't figure out, no matter how bad things get. And I just want to pull up some love from my mom really quick. Thank you for sharing your amazing story, your philosophies, and the impact you've had on Athena. So
I have to say, like
I
coming in today, I have to say, honestly, the thing that made me most happy is I know your mummy's going to be listening, and so like I'm channeling her love.
no,
Thank
like why, you
you.
know, you are the reason why my mom and I started exploring like this journey of like what is it, you know, like a relationship look like, mother and daughter as adults, because it's interesting, like you know, I left home at 17, and I think we related to each other as the mother of a 17-year-old and as a 17-year-old. So it's like, you know, this lockdown is there's no international flights, we're trapped together, and it's been amazing because we've been able to like just get into this new space of like what are we like as adults, and how can we relate to each other, and how can we help each other grow. And it's been pretty incredible. And I don't think, had the seeds not been planted along the way of starting to think of that, thanks to you in the first instance, you know, that we'd be saying that. Because I think in you know, even if this happened a year ago, we'd probably have been warring with each other a long time ago, because you know, I would go into like the 17-year-old mind, and it's still there. So it's so interesting, these relationships that we have with our family, and how, you know, we can get stuck in old ways of doing things, even with our family or the close ones, and like having that spirit of like, let's grow together, let's learn together, like let's try to communicate differently. It can have such an amazing impact. And
I'm Yeah, I'm so glad to hear the story. It makes me so happy. I had, I think it's true of every girl and her mom, really. It's such a unique experience, and it's an important one for those who have the courage to address the things, like when you're born, you think your mom's life starts when you're born. I know she had a whole life way before you came about, and you need to be old enough at some point to be able to suddenly conceive of her beyond you, and then you start to understand, gosh, all the things you went through, that and then you have a different conversation. Suddenly you're two humans
mm-hmm.
rather than this social construct of mom and daughter. You're just two people bonding who have bonded physically, but now you're able to conceive of each other in your other circumstances, and it's I'm really happy. I mean, for me, I had a similar relationship with my mom. It was, of course, it was, I suppose, with any mom, it went bad for a period, and now our relationship is just so cool and easygoing, and we just communicate over text now. It's really cute. It's really cute. But yeah, I'm so grateful for that book, and I'm really, really, it makes me even happier that it meant something to you, and that it had such a positive effect on you and your mom. I'm so happy for that.
Definitely. It's called The Heroine's Journey. We've mentioned it a couple times, but just in case you guys didn't catch the title. So wow, like just I think it's so funny the universe brought us back together. We're like, you know, it's interesting how when you go on a journey yourself, no matter where you are in the world, like, you know, the people that you kind of pull in or back into your life, you know? And I'm so grateful that we've been able to reconnect and kind of like realize that we've both been going on this journey of like finding our own version of living unrestricted and finding our own happiness and contentment and fulfillment while still, you know, valuing these skills that we have, is like being able to see in the future and do organization and management and stuff. So um my final question for you, which is my favorite question, is how do you define this idea of living unrestricted?
Okay, so as I said earlier, right, life changes. There are upheavals, you know, things come that you cannot possibly conceive of sometimes. So I would say, in order to live an unrestricted life, in one sense, it must be restricted in another sense to maintain balance, right? And what I mean by restriction in this case is the diligent and disciplined organization of things, you know, things
Mm.
outside of us. I'm talking about real life. There are mortgages and rent and shopping and, you know, logistics of life admin, as they like to say. If you can organize those things that must happen, that without which you would probably die of hunger, you know, the things that must
Mm.
happen, organize those, then that leaves you a whole space, you know, room for you to explore, to you know, you can live an unrestricted life and you know, explore new opportunities, because ultimately I'll say, by putting order to those things, by organizing those other things, what you're really doing is you're refining that base skill. And the base skill is not really to-do lists and organization. The base skill really is you are able to harness change, right?
Mm.
That's what you're really doing. You're able to create from nothing. And for me, that's beautiful. And if you can exact a little bit of order somewhere, a little bit of restriction somewhere, then you can have all the unrestrictedness that you want in your life, and to be able to design it and dream it to your own wishes.
Yes, queen. I love that so much because you know, it's a perfect way of explaining when these little things take up and occupy our brain, our heart space. Like, you know, when we're sitting with friends and family and all we can think about is like, oh, I didn't pay that bill or I need to do this thing. It's like when you put that stuff on automation, when you remove it from like, I have this system, I've got these things taken care of, it allows you to like open your heart and open your mind and just be present in your life and like
Exactly.
really enjoy the things in front of you and be present in those moments. Because when we don't have ourselves in control, we're either thinking of the future or the past.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You are so amazing. I'm
Oh
so happy.
no.
And that was just an amazing plug for my coaching program that I'm going to be announcing in a couple
I can't
days, by the
wait.
way. So
Can't
yeah,
wait.
if you want to get a little of this like organization superpower that allows you to feel like unrestricted and free while making progress on a project, then keep your eyes peeled on the mailing list. So Turath didn't know she was inadvertently like plugging that, but yeah, there we go.
Happy
Gonna
to
drop
do
a
so.
plug.
It's a valuable skill.
Shameless plug because we believe in it so much.
Oh yeah.
So thank you so much for being here. Like, wow, what an incredible story. And I think you like so humbly kind of like gloss over this idea of being orphaned and war torn and, you know, refugee, and like how you've turned this into this beautiful part of yourself, you know, and just become this amazing woman that has an incredible outlook on life, and the way that you know, put that into the world in terms of like how you enable people to be their best and put systems in place to like help things. So yeah, I think you're just a very special, amazing woman. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me. Thank you. And you know, if the universe is to be believed, you know, and I genuinely do, because it brought me you the first time, and then it brought me, you know, it brought me you again, all over again. And I'm super duper grateful. Thank you for this.
Me too. All right, lovely. I'm going to put you to one side while I talk about our guest one week. So hang out and I'll find you in a second.
See you later.
And then Next week on Unrestricted, it's the end of season 1. Can you believe it? This will be our 10th episode. First time I've ever done anything like this, and it's been amazing. So next week, we have Jen Fairburns, who is a life coach. She is a Spartan dynamo, and she is also the community manager at 1 Year No Beer, which is actually the place that I took my alcohol-free challenge, which ended up creating this alcohol-free lifestyle for myself and discovering my superpower. So she's incredible, really fun, and I just love her spirit of play. And she helps other moms kind of like get into this place where they feel like they're in control and thriving of their life. So please join me next week. We're going to be doing it live at the same time, and it's going to be the end of season 1 for a couple weeks. We'll see you next week. So thank you very much.